Welcome, Lynn. Thank you for being prepared to share your thyroid story with us. Tell us a little bit about you and then what made you think that you had a thyroid problem.
Okay. Yes. Good morning, Annabelle. It's lovely to be sharing my story, actually, because I think, like a lot of women, my story is quite complex. Thyroid issues build up over a long time. There's a lot of things that contribute to it. So it's been good for me to go back and have a think about that. I'm 62 years of age, so I'm to the stage where my thyroid became an issue for me. I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's at 50. So I went through that, I guess at the same time as I was going through menopause. And I really spent a lot of my 50s, certainly the first part of my 50s, healing myself and my body from Hashimoto's and getting stronger. And now I've moved on and I'm a coach myself. I'm a healthy brain, healthy aging coach. And one of the things I thought about this morning when I was thinking about talking about thyroid is how important the thyroid is to brain health. And of course, in the past, I never realized that, but now I understand. And if you don't get on top of your thyroid health and you continue to have autoimmunity issues, then you are actually destroying part of your brain as well as part of your thyroid. And once you start to do that, then you're well and truly on a downward spiral towards things like dementia. So my interest in thyroid health has been, I guess, it's been relit by all my studies with brain health and what I'm doing now. So my journey, like a lot of women, started, I was in my late 40s and I started to put weight on. And I was always reasonably slim and pretty active. And I couldn't understand why this weight was coming on. And I put it down to perimenopause, very busy, stressful corporate role. I'm a pretty typical type A personality, big corporate roles. I'd crashed and burned probably twice before in my career. So I thought, okay, I'm just getting older, getting a bit more tired. Got myself a personal trainer. Didn't make a scrap of difference. In fact, I discovered with the personal trainer that I just didn't have the energy. I was fatigued, and what she wanted me to do, I couldn't do. I joined Jenny Craig for the first time ever. That wasn't working. So they were the first signs for me. And I then moved forward and I left the job I was doing and came back to Brisbane. And I knew I was fatigued. I knew I wasn't that well. But I did a stupid thing, and I remember sitting and thinking it through very carefully. I took another big contract, probably way too big and way too stressful for me and my health at that stage. And that really was a spiral downwards. So within about 6 months, my hair was dry, my skin was dry. It was my hair was breaking off. I was cold all the time. I remember very strongly being very lightheaded. I felt like I was really never grounded. I couldn't start the day without 2 coffees. I really got to the stage where I couldn't even walk up a back stairs. I just felt like I was running completely on empty. I was not sleeping well. I had constipation, but constipation is not really something I worried about. I'd had endometriosis for the previous 30 years, so I understood autoimmune and things like that. So finally I got to the stage where I was working. I went downstairs to see a GP at lunchtime because I just felt so bad. And he wasn't anyone I've met before. He was a nice guy, listened to me, and he said, I'm going to send you off for blood tests and a brain MRI. So I thought, okay. But within a day, I was in the emergency at the Mater Private. So my blood pressure went up to 180. I was shaking all over. I had chest pain. And they put me into hospital for 5 days and did every test under the sun. I wasn't getting any better while I was there, and it was a very anxious time for me. The last doctor to come and see me was a psychiatrist who basically told me it was all in my head and prescribed anxiety medication and sent me home in tears. So I went home, went to bed and thought, how did I get to this stage? Highly successful woman, very driven, always been able to manage things. I didn't know where to go next. And thank the Lord and the universe 2 days later, that GP rang me and said, I know what's wrong with you. You've got Hashimoto's disease. So that was the start of my being able to then move forward. And I realized pretty quickly that I would have to find my own way, because back in 2012, by that stage, it was 2012, there wasn't a lot of information. It was pretty unusual. Like most of my information, I had to get out of books. I had to find the right sort of, I studied a lot of people from America, you know, Dr. Dadis Karazian and Dr. Alan Christensen and Amy Mize, etc. So I listened to all their stuff, read their books. And that basically was the start of me starting to heal myself. But it was, so I guess looking back now, I can see what led to that. And now then I just had to I guess find my way forward without really a good practitioner or anyone to really help me that much.
Yeah. So you've really had to be self-empowered and self-directed and really advocate for your own personal health. Yeah, yeah. So many of us are that, you know, driven. I know you said you've listened to the podcast, and so you probably heard me talk about that thyroid personality. And that's just so, I'll just do this bit more. I'll just push through. I can do it. You know? And it just it works until it doesn't work.
That's right. And the one thing that I remember very, very strongly, because I'd always had a really sharp mind and, you know, been able to perform, was the foggy brain. That drove me insane. I just thought, you know, and memory problems. I remember leaving my handbag on a trolley in Woolworths, and I got home and somebody had taken it and I never got it back. And I was beside myself. I thought, how could you be so stupid? But that was just par for the course at that stage. And I got to the stage where I double checked everything I did. And I think and of course, I don't know whether you experienced this, but I've got a husband who's looking at me as if to say, what the hell is going on here? Because they don't get it. You don't get it. And there's no real explanations.
Yeah, that's actually a topic I've had on my list to cover on the podcast for quite a long time now. So I really need to push it further up the list, because it probably hasn't made it to the top because it hasn't been my personal experience. Because I think, because I was diagnosed when I was 22, so when I met my husband, I just am how I am. I mean, I've changed over time, obviously, but there wasn't Annabelle's like this and then something happened and then she was like that. Yeah. So there's definitely been periods of time in our marriage where I've, you know, been more healthy and less. But, you know, I know it's a big issue and I know it puts a lot of strain on a lot of relationships. So it is a really important topic that I definitely need to cover.
And even just, you know, the stories around how you take your husband with you in regard to what you need to change around your life, because I completely changed how I lived. And he had to come on that journey with me.
Absolutely. They tend to. They tend to. Lee says, I'm much healthier because of what you do. And it's true.
Yes.
Like, it is true. So that probably is a nice segue into, you know, well, for the last 10 or so years, how have you been managing your thyroid health as a result of all the self-directed learning and, you know, things that you've done? What's working for you, or what have you tried that hasn't worked? Yeah.
Sure. So the hardest part was the first 12 months. And so I had to take 6 months off work. I just could not work. I was just too sick. And that was really important for me to start the healing process. And what I started with, I did manage to find you'd probably call them a functional specialist now, a functional practitioner. There's not many in Brisbane, and I still struggle to find anyone that I want to work with. But I found a doctor, and I waited 3 months for an appointment, as you did in those days, for anybody that was even remotely, you know, alternative or functional or integrated. And he focused very much, when I finally got to see him, on things like my hormones. So I had also had my ovaries out. So because I'd had endometriosis all my life, they took my uterus out at 43. Then they took my ovaries out at 49. So that threw me into immediate menopause.
Yeah.
So I was experiencing at the same time earlier on menopausal symptoms and thyroid issues. So in one way, the Hashimoto's worked really well, because as I healed my Hashimoto's, I dealt with all the menopause symptoms, because what you
Yeah.
do to be really well with Hashis is incredibly good for you, your hormones. So we looked at my testosterone, my progesterone, my estrogen. He looked at all my supplements, things like your selenium, vitamin D, all those things. So he put me onto all the right supplements, and we dealt with my hormones. I went on to progesterone cream, and we did all of that. But separate to that, I realized I had to heal my gut and completely detox my body. I think I'm pretty sure, well, I've never really had all my gene testing done. I will do that at some stage. But I do have some genetic SNPs that really affect methylation, glutathione levels, liver, etc. So to me, I had to find my way through detoxing my body and healing my gut. And I think that's probably the very first thing anyone should do with with thyroid disease, because your gut is so critical to all health. And for me, it was absolutely critical. That took many, many, many months. I went on to a completely restricted diet, took gluten out immediately, and I've never eaten gluten since. So that was it. That's a given for me. Dairy, sugar, meats, just went on to a highly restricted diet so I could heal my body and give it time to all the inflammation to settle down and for my antibodies to come down. So I did that. I did a lot of that hand in hand with my naturopath. So there was three of us working on my health, me, this practitioner, and my naturopath, who was absolutely essential. And so we worked big time on doing things like, I had Ross River fever in my previously, only 4 or 5 years before, when I lived and worked on Hamilton Island. I'd had Epstein-Barr. I had herpes. So all of that needed to be calmed down. My immune system was completely exhausted and out of whack. So we had to work on getting the viruses and any infections sorted. We had to detox and get as much of the toxins out of my body as gently as possible, because I discovered I have a system that is so sensitive. She will give me a quarter of what everybody else would, you too. And I don't think that's unusual. So, you'd sort of read this stuff and they'd say, right, take this glutathione or this NAC and do this and do that. And of course, for me, it would just throw me right over the edge. So I found food was the best way to do it. So nutritious, the right food and supplements worked for me very, very slowly. I couldn't exercise in those days, but I did I introduced Qigong. Qigong was a wonderful healing process for me.
Yep.
I remember going to my first Qigong class when I over at Paddington, and some of it I just couldn't even do then. It was so difficult for me in regard to my energy levels and what was blocked in my system. So I did a lot of energy work with my naturopath. We did a lot of oils, a lot of teas. She had a microcurrent machine. I'm a big fan of Reiki and energy medicine. For me, I respond extremely well to that. And I think you just got to find what works for you. Homeopathics work really well for me. So we did a lot of homeopathic medicines. So it was really a combination of gently, slowly rebuild the body. And that took me about, I would say, the first year or 18 months I spent doing that. I went back to work after 6 months, part-time, and I could cope with that. So the other key thing is taking the stress out of your life. So got rid of the big corporate jobs and went back just contracting and doing, I was lucky I had people that wanted me to come and do bits and pieces for them. And got a rebounder. So I started using a rebounder gently to get my lymphatics working. Infrared sauna, really great for me. Couldn't do much of it initially. Was way too overwhelming, but over time it improved. So I just peeled the layers off step by step using all those different things. And I took one of the critical things for me was taking all chemicals out of my life. So found an organic hairdresser. At those stages, I was still dyeing my hair. All my body products, put in all natural products, all our cleaning products. This was one of the hard things with my husband, organic foods, spray-free foods, wild-caught fish. It's sort of like, what that? This all costs more money, so that was a long process. And I also, water filters was critical for me. So I put in a whole system, reverse osmosis with a remineralizer, and that was critical, getting those. And they're all things that are now continue to be part of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's it makes you realize listening to you speak. I mean, a lot of that is stuff that I've done too, is that there is a lot involved, but that's over I mean, even the intense period for you was, you said, 18 months. So none of this happens super quickly.
No.
This is, and you're talking over a 10-year period. For me, it's been over a 25-year period.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what I love about hearing people's stories, because what I hope is, if you're listening to this and you're newer in your thyroid journey, that you take some encouragement from this, because you don't have to rush. Like,
no.
There is, I mean, it's frustrating, and particularly frustrating when you're sort of personality that wants to just dive right in. And as you said, like, I've had to learn the hard way too, of taking supplements that are too strong, or, and I was like, well, everybody else seems to be able to take the full dose and get amazing results. Why is it not happening for me?
Exactly.
Because I think we want to get in. We're action takers. Let's get in, get this done, sort it out. I want to move on. But it just doesn't work that way, and it takes time to figure that out. So, yeah.
And you need to think that you probably spend a lot of time making your body sick. So we didn't just get sick overnight. I remembered that I think I was about 48, and the local doctor on Hamilton had said to me, your bloods have come back, because this is when I wasn't feeling great up there, and I'd had the Ross River fever. And he said, you've got rumbling Hashimoto's. But he said, don't worry about that. He said, when it's a problem, we'll give you some medication. Now, of course, in retrospect, I think back now and think if I could have taken some action then, but I didn't. And I didn't know any better, and I was incredibly busy, and I loved my job. And so I just kept doing what I was doing. But that was the first sign, and that's a typical reaction from the medical profession. And I learned that very early on. I was very thankful that the doctor had discovered it and said to me, here it is, and I could do something with it. And he gave me some thyroxine, some 50 milligram thyroxine, which I've been on ever since. I've never gone over 50, but I have introduced, alternate days I take a T4, T3 mix that is specially made up, and that works really well for me. It was probably the next step in and I only started doing that in 2019. I came across a practitioner who helped me with that. He mentioned black cumin seed oil.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it is cumin, black seed. Yeah, it is black cumin seed, black seed oil. I think it's called a few different things. Yeah,
that's right.
Or Nigella Is it Nigella stevia?
Sativa.
Yeah, sativa.
Stevia.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, sativa, not stevia. Yes, sativa. You're right.
So that made a huge difference for a while. And I was thinking the other day, I thought maybe I'll give that a go, because we got locked down overseas during COVID. So we got locked down in Spain, and luckily for 7 months, I had all my stuff with me, because we were doing a 9-month trip. I was very blessed. So I had my thyroid meds. I had enough for 12 months with me, and I managed to get some of that. And when I came back, my TSH was under 1, and I actually put it down to that. And my last lot of TSH, my last lot of bloods, not probably the lot before last, I went up to 2.5, which I like to be below 1 or 1 to 1.5 if I can with my TSH. But I knew what was putting it up. I had inflammation. I wasn't well, So it's an ongoing thing. You have to, we have people with Hashimoto's and autoimmune disease have a body that needs constant care. So I now have psoriasis, which is my third autoimmune disease. Now, I got that after Spain, after being locked down, because stress brought it on. You can imagine, coming back, having to do quarantine, all that nonsense.
Oh, gosh.
So, I have a system that is susceptible to that. So keeping my body as healthy as possible is absolutely critical to me staying well.
Yeah.
And I think that's important for anybody with an autoimmune disease, and any woman with Hashimoto's or Graves or whatever it is. It doesn't go away. You just get it under control and you manage it well. And, your system gets healthier, but you still have that susceptibility, and things will still push you over the edge.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's it's a good perspective. It's a healthy perspective to have. And we can't just get rid of it in a sense. No.
You know.
Yeah. So Lynn, if you were to go back, if you could go back in time and give yourself some advice from the beginning of your thyroid journey, what would it be?
Look, I don't really know, to tell you the truth, because I am who I am. And, I wouldn't have, I see my Hashimoto's as a wonderful gift. And once I started recognizing that, and it took about a year before I really started to recognize what a wonderful gift it was. It was the final thing with my body saying, we've had enough. You cannot keep doing this. And I listened to it. So the biggest message, I guess, is learn to listen to your body, learn to love your body, and be kind to it. I probably, because of my personality, wouldn't have done anything different with my, my career and my choices. And I'm just very pleased that once I knew what was wrong, I very much I took responsibility for my own health. And I think that's the critical thing. I've never expected doctors to provide solutions to me, or to be I use them as I would use a naturopath, but ultimately my health is my own responsibility. So I probably would have taken more notice of the rumbling Hashimoto's suggestion by the doctor, but I didn't know any different,
Yeah.
And I probably shouldn't have taken that big contract that pushed me over the edge, but it was who I was at the time, and that's what I did. So it's interesting, because I guess the other thing is that, as you would know, one of the times when women tend to be diagnosed with Hashimoto's is during menopause, when all the hormones change.
Yeah.
And I guess that was sort of, for me, it was like that ultimate storm. The big jobs, and a lot of women, this is when they get sick in their 50s, their 40s and their 50s, because they're in stages in their career where they're incredibly busy. They've got busy families. Their hormones are changing, and that's when they tend to, I guess, experience a lot of these issues. And the key thing that I didn't realize at the time was, when women are going through perimenopause and menopause, that's probably one of the most critical health times for them in their life. Because with the reduction in estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, etc., if they don't look after themselves in their 50s, they're not going to be well in their 60s and 70s and 80s. So they've done it, women's bodies and brains age differently to men, and a lot of the research now is showing that. So I guess, would I have done anything differently? I would think I was lucky that I got the Hashimoto's, because it meant that I did look after myself in my 50s. And my menopausal symptoms pretty much disappeared after a couple of years.
Yeah. That's such a beautiful perspective. It is a gift.
Yeah.
It is a gift. Yeah. Yeah. And as you say that, I'm nearly 49. I don't think I'm experiencing too many perimenopause symptoms just yet, but I'm certainly aware of some. And I was talking to my doctor just a few weeks ago, and she was saying, well, yeah, when your hormones shift, well, it sort of often that's masking the Hashimoto's.
Yes.
And so you've kind of got nowhere to hide when that starts to change. So yeah, I thought that was quite helpful to think, okay, all right, that's really going to reveal what's underneath, what's left.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And you might find with your dropping hormones that some of your Hashi symptoms come back.
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, possibly, because it's no longer being masked. There's no buffer.
Yeah, that's right.
There's no buffer. So anyway, well, yeah, all the adventures that are yet to lay ahead with every different stage of living with Hashimoto's.
Being a woman.
So, yeah, being a woman, that's right. Well, Lynn, I want to thank you for sharing your thyroid story, and I know it's a small snippet into a window into your story, but I really do appreciate you doing that, because I know there'll be people that listen that can resonate with you in a way that they won't resonate with anyone else. So I really do want to thank you.
I do appreciate it. And I've enjoyed sharing it. And I hope it does make a difference to someone, because I know how desperate you can be when you're feeling, there's nothing harder than being unwell. And, people sort of say, well, why were you prepared to do all of that and change your life so significantly? And it's like, well, it's much harder to be sick than it is to do what you need to do to be well. And I think that's something that we all need to recognize.
Yeah. Yeah. Choose your hard in the end. It's choosing your
Yeah.
hard. Yeah. Choose your
Yeah,
hard. And it
exactly.
doesn't have to be hard. I mean, once you know that you can feel good, um, it's much more motivating to keep going.
Yeah.
It's when you don't feel good and you feel like there's nothing you can do about it. And I
Yeah.
think, there's people that don't even know that they don't feel good because they
Exactly.
haven't felt good for such a long period of time, if ever,
Yeah.
that they don't have that comparison. So, yeah, there is
I
definitely
agree.
hope.
And it is just part of, like, for you and me, it's just part of how we live now. It just
Yeah.
becomes part of who you are, and it becomes easier. And yeah, to feel really well. And I'm stronger and healthier at 62 than I was in my 40s, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you look very vibrant and shiny.
Mm,
You
mm.
look. So if you're watching this on YouTube or watching the visual, you'll see. Yeah, Lynn, you do look like a very
Oh, thank you. That's
healthy. You
good.
do. You're glowing. So
Yeah.
you're a
Well,
good
we just came
testament.
back last
Yeah.
year. We spent 6 months traveling around the world.
Oh wow.
And, we did 10 to 15K a day. So it was great. And it certainly, I had the energy, and I could never have done that. There's no way I could have done that 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah. Well, that's the perks of putting in
Yeah,
the effort. Yeah. Well
exactly.
done. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Thyroid. If you have enjoyed the content, or perhaps you're thinking, oh, my mum needs to hear this, or my sister, or my bestie, I would love it if you would share this episode with them. That really just helps spread the positive and practical message of Let's Talk Thyroid, and helps that broader thyroid community, our friends and family, to live well with their thyroid health. So you can just, share the episode. If you subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast, it's free. It's really helpful because then you'll be notified every time a new podcast comes out, and it just makes it much easier to find. There's usually a little subscribe button or a bell, or follow often is the terminology. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be helpful. Of course, if you want to leave a review, even better, just a sentence or two about how the podcast has helped you. You can definitely connect with me via letstalkthyroid.com. That's where you'll find access to my book, my coaching, my freebies, and really everything that I offer in terms of thyroid support.